Something I like about modern fighting games from big franchises now is we're seeing long-standing characters change their appearance on default. No longer is Ryu just wearing his white gi, he's shirtless and has a beard now. Paul Phoenix is allowed to have more than one hairstyle, he can ditch the gel and wear it down. Mei doesn't need a traditional pirate outfit, she can chill out in a hoodie. But for around 30 years, I feel a majority of developers of reoccurring fighting game franchises didn't change their most iconic characters when it came to their default costumes for the most part. So for this video, I want to look at some of the most interesting redesigns of fighting game characters from the days of old. Basically, this means a character with an established look has their costume, appearance, or even age changed up for a major installment of a series. Perhaps their moveset even changes. The only restriction is I'll be going one character per series of origin. Now, let's review the top 10 fighting game character redesigns. Number 10. Makuro from The Last Blade 2. The Last Blade only had 2 games in its whole series that were released a year apart from each other, so you would think that's not enough time to fully redesign characters in a sprite-based fighting game, and you'd mostly be right. Almost every returning character looks the same as they did in the first game, and the budget seems to have gone to all the new characters they created for the sequel, but they still managed to give a few characters the redesign treatment. Most notably, the main character Kaede, who had dark hair in the first game, is now blonde in the sequel since his power has been awakened. However, the coolest character change to me was the character Makuro in the sequel. Technically, he's a new character since there was no Makuro in the Last Blade game before that, but he's quite clearly the fighter Shikyo from the first game. Shikyo was not a nice guy. He killed for fun and had double blades that could combine into a single blade for extra carnage. He was very manic in how he swung his weapons, so he had no tact. He just likes to cut things and laugh at people for being in pain. In his arcade mode ending in the first game, he falls into the abyss. Other characters get a nice ending when they beat the boss, but Shikyo is apparently punished for his immorality. And this ending apparently happened to him, since when The Last Blade 2 came out, he was replaced with a zombified version of himself called Makuro. Nothing is really different about his attacks or even his personality. He still likes cutting like a madman, and despite being a zombie now, he seems to remember all the tricks of his double blade boomerang thing. His mannerisms are a bit more zombie-like, such as his noises or his hunched forward stance, but he never really had the best posture when he was alive either, so overall, not much has changed outside of his appearance. What I love about this redesign is they put in that extra effort. With the sequel having a bunch of new characters, I don't think anyone would have cared if all the returning characters were unchanged, and usually with fighting game arcade mode endings, most of them are what-if scenarios, so I also wouldn't have expected Shikyo to have stayed dead between games, which makes this storytelling through character designs even cooler for me. I wonder why he got the special treatment. Even though he's a jerk in both life and death, this change made me like Makuro and or Shikyo way more than I would have if he stayed the same. Number 9. Robert Garcia from The Art of Fighting. Art of Fighting had your standard melodramatic plotline, with Robert being the secondary protagonist next to Ryo Sakazaki. Ryo and Robert were the Ryu and Ken respectively, but Robert always felt like he could have had more of a spotlight in the first 2 games, since there was a greater focus on Ryo's family, with his sister Yuri and father Takuma all being in the plot of the first game and on the roster of the second. Robert still had his reason to be there. Takuma was his teacher and Yuri was his love interest, but he was there more for support. His appearance was cool though, being an Andy Garcia-Steven Seagal hybrid, with white pants and an orange vest. But Art of Fighting did something really cool to me after that, and made the 3rd game Robert's plotline. The story and characters revolved around Robert, and the default character to select was not Ryo like it was in the other games, it's Robert, to indicate that it's his time to shine. And to prepare for his game, Robert changed changed his outfit. His original vest felt more casual, so now that he's the main character, he put on something formal as a button-up that's not fully buttoned up can be. But I like this. The blue is a really cool color, and it matches his white pants still. I like how they gave him his own game as a reward after being a good friend in the first 2 installments. And this was the last Art of Fighting game, so his story was the finale. But that's only because Art of Fighting was later combined with the King of Fighters series. Robert swapped between his 2 main outfits for a bit in those games, but once the early 2000s King of Fighters games hit, they kept changing him up. In 2003, they put a blue button-up vest on him. You can see he's trying to do that shirt unbuttoned look again, but that vest is preventing a fully exposed chest. For the King of Fighters 11, they used his model from Neo Geo Battle Coliseum, where he just looks different now. His hair's untied, his shirt's purple, he's posing like he's on the cover of a romance novel. His final redesign for now was in the King of Fighters 14 and 15, where he got a new vest and shirt, but more importantly, he got facial hair. I honestly didn't recognize him when I first saw this design. Without his normal clothing indicators, I thought he was a random suave guy entering the roster for the first time. But nope, all he needed was a little mustache goatee combo and he's a new man. I love the variety of style in these outfits, but it always struck me as odd that Robert was the only Art of Fighting character to get these full redesigns. For the core Art of Fighting characters that appeared in most King of Fighters games, Ryo, Yuri, and Takuma never really changed their outfits, and the Bartender King had on her base shirt and usually switches on and off some vests, but not to the extent Robert gets all these new clothes. I really want to know why. Why does Robert get everything new while the rest of the Art of Fighting characters stay in their outfits from the early 90s? I love that they do this, but I want to see it done for his friends too. Number 8. Lao from Virtua Fighter. Virtua Fighter is a series that doesn't ever show the passage of time, which is fine. It's not a story-based game, so there was no need to. The main changes we see to characters are really just the colors of outfits and eventual alternate costumes, so all you were really expecting with each new game were graphics upgrades and new characters. But one character that's been around since the first game was the martial arts veteran Lao. He was always portrayed as older than the rest of the cast, like his 50s or 60s, but the only way he ever showed his age in the first 4 games was to add wrinkles to his face when they had the technology. However, Virtua Fighter 5 gave Lao his biggest change, gray hair. As much as this seems like it's just a pretty small change that's the equivalent to changing the color of a costume, they changed more of his demeanor to truly make it feel like he was getting frailer. In the 4th game, we learned he had an undisclosed illness with no cure, and by the 5th game, we saw it taking effect, not just on his hair, but his skin was paler, his eyes were a little bloodshot, and he was coughing after rounds. It was shocking to see a character in a series that was so set in time change this much, though the fact that he can still go hard in a fight makes it cool that he can overcome his condition. Can't really say I like this design better than the older one, since it's sad to see him in this state, but I appreciate how it acts as visual storytelling. What's even more shocking is Virtua Fighter 5 came out in 2006, and every game that came out after it was just a revamped version of 5, so we've got no updates on Lao's condition. I'm hoping that whenever Virtua Fighter 6 comes out, we'll get some good news. And if Virtua Fighter 6 never comes out, I guess he technically never dies now. Number 7. Jack from Tekken. Jack is a character tailor-made to be redesigned. While some characters in Tekken constantly change their outfits or hairstyles or age or don't age, Jack is a robot who gets rebuilt for each game. The latest state-of-the-art technology changes his appearance, but keeps his moveset in memory, which is convenient for the player. You can tell which Jack is from which game based on the number in its name, with the exception of the Jack from the first game who's just just called Jack, and Tekken 3's Jack, who's called Gun Jack. Also, Tekken 4 did not have a Jack on the roster, but Jack 4 does appear in some flashbacks of other Tekken games, and in spin-off games like the Tag Tournament games, they use the Jack that came out in the mainline series game before it, such as Jack 6 being in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. The Jacks in the first two games were simplistic, going with a tank top or army fatigues, and they blended in with the humans pretty well, not really showing their robot parts. They weren't hiding that they were robots though, since their noises and stiff movements were dead giveaways. Tekken 3 added more metallic textures up front and set the stage for future Jacks looking more robotic. In Tekken 5 and 6, he had clear robot features all over his body, but they at least made them skin tone so he can tell himself that he's camouflaged to make him feel human. Then Tekken 7 and 8 gave him his biggest changes yet, making him look less human. 7 discolored him more by giving him green coursing through his robot veins and a red mohawk, and 8 gave him a lot more future tech. It's the first time we can't see his eyes. To add to the number of redesigns that Jack has had, his prototype form was playable in the early games in the tag tournaments. Usually it's Jack, but gray and more prone to malfunctioning, but the first game just had him as a bunch of random tech held together by duct tape and bubblegum. I don't know why they completely retconned this design, but I think it's funny. His personality also got a bit of a redesign. In the first two games, he was a weapon of war mass-produced for combat, but a specific Jack robot from Tekken 2 rescued a child and gained a sense of compassion. In return, when Jane, the child, grew up, she became a scientist who developed new Jack robots, usually to stalk out evil people, and she kept the memories of the Jack that rescued her on a hard drive, so she could transfer his memory to each new Jack model as technology was advancing, which is a sweet story. Because of that, Jack seems like a gentle giant when he doesn't have to punch you into next Tuesday. My favorite bit of humor is when he continuously pounds his chest until he falls over, and then continues the motion with a straight face. Thanks to him being humanized by Jane, Jack is one of those characters who looks like he'll be all stoic and no nonsense when you look at him, but if you get to know him, he's just a bit of a goofball who likes to flex on ya. Number 6. Chun-Li from Street Fighter. Street Fighter generally kept the same character designs over the years. It wasn't until Street Fighter 6 where all the classic characters from Street Fighter 2 got full costume redesigns across the board. For whatever reason, Capcom seemed a bit gun-shy to change anything about their core characters up front. If we ignore Street Fighter 1 and consider Street Fighter 2 the original designs, these costumes were basically the default for over 30 years. Street Fighter Alpha changed a few designs, but not by much. Street Fighter 3 didn't change the outfits of the 4 returning characters. Street Fighter 4 was the big return after a decade, so no one was changed, but there were a lot of alternate costumes. And Street Fighter 5 mostly went with the defaults again, with a few characters getting minor changes, like Dalsim growing a beard or Guile getting a vest, and once again, a lot of alternate costumes. And then as I mentioned, all returning characters got new default costumes in Street Fighter 6. Now Ryu's got a beard and Zangief's got pants. But I've always wondered why for years Capcom was so averse to making default costume changes, especially since it seemed like they were cool with it in Alpha. For context, Street Fighter Alpha was the first true follow-up to Street Fighter 2 that wasn't just a new edition of 2. Since it was a prequel, they redesigned the main 3 characters to be a bit younger, very minor changes for the most part. Ryu's headband is now white, and Ken got a ponytail. However, the most interesting change to me was Chun-Li's outfit, since it went through the most notable change. Instead of her poofy dress and boots, she's got a sleeveless bodysuit on with a vest and sneakers. Her wristbands are also less spiky, and the cloth over her hair buns was replaced with different ties. I love this costume. It has elements of the dress design, but still manages to be its own thing. What always made this stand out to me was the developers kinda walked it back a bit. In later versions of Street Fighter Alpha, we were given an option to give her the classic dress from Street Fighter 2, and I've always wondered why she got the special treatment. No one else got their old outfit or any alternate costumes for other characters, so why did Chun-Li? I've heard rumors that people were mad that the old outfit was not an alpha when it came out in the 90s, so they drew over every sprite to give her the old outfit, but with no internet records of that, seems like it could just be a rumor or an inside joke. Still, I see some validity to that theory. Like when Capcom reused the alpha sprites for the various crossover games of the 90s, they went with the dress rather than the default alpha costume. Or maybe I'm looking too much into this. Regardless, I've always considered Chun-Li's alpha costume to be the first major character redesign in the series. Though after alpha, she went back to her old costume for a while, but I feel Street Fighter 4 and 5 pushed her more fancy dress alternate costume as her new costume that would have been her default if they weren't afraid of change, even giving that new dress official artwork. And if you count alternate costumes as a part of the redesigns, Chun-Li has an insane amount of them in Street Fighter 5. Like, where do you even start? Whoever put her in this wedding dress had some dreams. But as far as redesigns go, it all began with the alpha costume. Number 5. Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat is probably the series that redesigns their characters the most, especially if they were from the original trilogy and from the original game itself. So I really want to dedicate this entry to that whole original roster and how much they've been redesigned over the years, but since I've been doing one character per series, I thought we'd focus on Liu Kang, since I think he has some of the more consistent redesigns, while still majorly changing aspects of his character, and he's front and center as the protagonist, so what he's wearing tends to be spotlighted the most. In the first game, he was a full-on Bruce Lee imitator, going with his Enter the Dragon look of no shirt and black pants. This look rarely ever reappears for him when he has a throwback costume. I think Mortal Kombat X is the only game to directly reference it. In Mortal Kombat 2, we saw his most reoccurring look, where he now has red and black pants with a red headband. As far as Liu Kang looks go, this is generally what people think of when you say Liu Kang. He separates himself from being a Bruce Lee clone with this outfit, but still has some of his mannerisms and gained a powerful new move, the bicycle kick. Mortal Kombat 3 repeated this look, but with longer hair, so it's either MK2 or 3 when we want the classic Liu Kang look. Mortal Kombat 4 changed very little, but gave Liu Kang a shirt. Good for him. The next game, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, killed off Liu Kang. Yeah, good for him. Then Mortal Kombat Deception had the most drastic change yet, keeping his typical outfit but reviving him as a zombie, which is mostly odd since I think it was the only time Mortal Kombat did a full-on Night of the Living Dead for resurrecting a character. He was also a spirit in that game if you wanted the classic look. Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe and Mortal Kombat 2011 went back to the MK2 and 3 look, since those games harkened back to a more classic era of Mortal Kombat. And then we got another major change. With Liu Kang dying in Mortal Kombat 2011, his main look was now as a Revenant with sinister glowing eyes and gray skin since he's corrupted now. In Mortal Kombat X, it was his alternate, and in Mortal Kombat 11, it was his default. He also had human costumes in those games, some of which experimented with the outfits. Finally, in Mortal Kombat 1, which is actually the 12th game, he's now ascended to being the God of Fire and has glowy, godly powers. He went from being a human to a zombie to a human again to a different type of undead to a god. Pretty drastic changes all things considered, especially since he's usually the main character. Maybe not the most popular, that probably goes to Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and maybe even Raiden before him, but it shows the developers were always willing to experiment with the norm, for better or for worse. And as I said, I could really put the whole original roster here for the entry. To rapid fire my thoughts on their redesigns, Scorpion was the most consistent, wearing his yellow ninja outfit in all games. Sub-Zero's biggest changes were the games where he was maskless on default. Sonya is all over the place, either going for professional military attire or a more relaxed workout outfit. Raiden is also pretty consistent, usually going with his hat and body covering outfit, but he goes dark sometimes. Johnny Cage is Johnny Cage. Kano was a balding or bald guy, but since his actor in the live-action movie Trevor Goddard had such an iconic performance, Most games modeled Kano after him once that movie came out. He's also Australian now, even though Goddard was allegedly trying to do a British accent. And as a bonus, Reptile used to be a reptile man disguised as a human, then he went full-on reptile man, then he went really full-on reptile man, then he was a bit less reptile man, and now he's full-on reptile but stays in a human disguise when not attacking. I guess that means he's come full circle. I actually like overly reptilian Reptile. It differentiates him a lot more from the other multicolored ninjas. Number 4, Kim Woo from Killer Instinct. This is really just a Trojan horse for me to bypass my 1 per series rule to say all of Killer Instinct belongs on this list. Killer Instinct 2013 changed up nearly all of the designs from the first 2 games, and they all look great. I don't even know how to describe Jago's 90s outfit, like maybe 90s punk, but I love how they designed him for 2013. He exchanges his ripped shirt for a tiger tattoo, which shines when he activates his powers. Then you have Orchid, who used to have on a jumpsuit, but now she has on something a bit more techy. The former final boss Idol was turned from a 2-headed demon into an ogre with his head cut in half, where one side covers his physical attacks and the other covers his magic attacks based on the side that's awake, because before it was cut in half, he was a master of everything. What? That's insanely creative. Even Spinal, who's just a skeleton with a sword in the original, got a noticeable upgrade. Old Spinal was cool since everyone likes a skeleton with a sword, but now they gave him more stuff to make him feel kind of like a Viking. Some of the designs were basically the same and just got polished a bit, like Saberwolf, Riptor, or Fulgor, but my favorite of the 2013 redesigns was always Kim Woo. The characters that were new to the Killer Instinct 2 roster never really stood out too much to me. They were cool in concept, but I never got to know them as well as the original roster. Original Kim Woo had a nice fighting style with her nunchaku, but 2013 Kim brought a lot more personality. She's serious, but she knows that she's hot stuff, proclaiming that she's got a friggin' dragon.
I've got a friggin' dragon.
I love the idea of a character being like, yeah, these are ancient powers and they're not of this world. Of course I'm gonna acknowledge how cool they are. Both backstories have her as a descendant of demon slayers essentially, but 2013 shows that Kim still has a life outside of it all. She's a fashion designer, but she's cool with balancing that life with fighting. Like, she's not gonna just drop everything and be stoic right away, she's got a life. And her outfit combines the traditional with the modern. I love how she wears the pink part of her old outfit as a cape now. It adds a lot of personality watching it flow as she flies around the stage. And the moveset is in the spirit of the original, with all the nunchaku swings and dragon kicks. Really, the energy in this version of Kim Woo sums up what I love about all the Killer Instinct 2013 redesigns.
You can't run from fate, but you should have tried.
Number 3, Potemkin from Guilty Gear. Like Street Fighter 6, Guilty Gear's latest entry at the time of this video's release, Strive, revamped all of their returning characters. Guilty Gear designs tended to stay the same up until Strive for the most part. From the first game to the second game, which was then upgraded about 50 times, every returning character looked the same, but with 1000% improved sprites. And the same basically happened when Ixard was released, since the major design change in this game was making the 3D models look 2D, so we didn't care as much that the costumes were the same. Still, a few returning characters had new costumes in Ixard, like Milia, but no one was as ahead of the curve for the Strive redesigns like Potemkin. He went from minimal clothing to maximal clothing. In the first few games, he only had on pants, gauntlets, and a giant collar that was a bomb. Also a ponytail that's kinda hard to see over the collar. The collar bomb was to force him to fight in the military, since they liked his strong arms and had him fight under duress, and the gauntlets are equipped with guns so they could shoot. When Ixard came out, they removed the bomb collar and leaned way more into the military and bullet wristband aspects of his character. Now he has on full military attire and everything around his hands are massive. He's a grappler, and this art style and costume really emphasize the most important part of his fighting style. Those hands have a lot of range, and it looks like the gloves have even more weaponry in them now. I mean, he himself is a weapon. Have you ever ever been Potemkin bustered? Not fun to be on the receiving end. Also, love the new helmet, though why did they give him the glowing red eyes? Are they trying to make him look like a mech now? Also want to note that the ponytail is replaced with a fluffy thing on the back of his helmet, so some aspects of the old design that aren't apparent are still around with the new one, like with that or the way his collar is set up. It was such a cool redesign that he did not need another redesign when Strive came out. They just made him seem a bit more top-heavy in the artwork. With all this extra armor weighing him down, they managed to make a big character feel even more massive. When the Backstreet Boys said, "That makes you larger than life," they're talking about Xard Potemkin. Number 2, Astaroth from Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur is another game that gives its characters new default costumes every game, but most of them resemble or are in the spirit of the costumes from the previous game, which is a great way to do it. You keep it fresh while still keeping something familiar. But in terms of a character who tends to get more of a makeover than usual, besides Yoshimitsu, Astaroth comes to mind first. He's a golem created by Ares, the god of war, and a cult that follows him. Since he's a creation, he can be rebuilt to completely change up his appearance, so it's like how Jack was upgraded for new Tekken games. The original look for Astaroth in the first 2 Soul Calibur games was as a big dude with minimal clothing, a few spiky things, a mask, and his heart that powers him. Also a giant axe because Hulk smash. Soul Calibur 3 turned him red, and then Soul Calibur 4 gave him a bigger makeover, where now he's a molten rock man. But don't worry, he's still angry. Story-wise, this shows how the golem became corrupted and went mad. He worked with the villain Nightmare to collect souls for the wicked sword Soul Edge, with the intention to betray him and steal the sword for Ares. But shards of the sword got into Astaroth and forced him to keep working for Soul Edge. I always interpreted the molten rock design to be his body at the brink of explosion, with the combination of evil sword and Ares magic not mixing well. This is also the game where he's canonically destroyed, so I like the visual implication. Soul Calibur 5 had my favorite Astaroth design though. This was after he was destroyed and rebuilt to be mass-produced. Now he's green, with electricity coursing through him, and he has these bolts all over his body. Since it's a different creator for him now, it feels like the metal parts represent how he's a Frankenstein's creation, just being powered with modern tech rather than magic. This also has my favorite helmet design, where it looks like he has a skeleton mouth, but that's just his face mask. I wonder if the creator was trying to be edgy and thought this would make him look more scary and people would think he has a skeleton head under there. I also like his alternate costume in this game, which is just Astaroth as a robot. It shows that Astaroth can be built in any way as long as he has the size and anger requirements. With Soul Calibur 6 being a rebooted timeline, his design sorta went back to the first design, but now he's more of a grayish purple and has more detailed clothing with bone spikes and stuff. Still, minimal clothing. I like whenever he was redesigned, it was when he had a different master. It's a cool way to get story in there. Also, I want to shout out Namco's party game Pac-Man Fever, which is Pac-Man and other Namco characters in a Mario Party style game. For Soul Calibur, Astaroth was the representative for the series in this awkward chibi model. You know, I never thought of Astaroth as the face of the franchise, but I'm happy for him that he was.
Shut up! Stop making! Good! You're quiet now!
So I did not know who to pick for number 1, and honestly, I still don't. No redesign stands above the rest for me, so I went with a character who just felt right. Not only did they have one major enough redesign, but they had a bunch of tiny ones that you might not even notice too. Number 1, Terry Bogard from Fatal Fury. Terry is the main character of Fatal Fury, and has been in all the King of Fighters games ever since that became the home for all the Fatal Fury characters. When he's in those games, he usually has his classic outfit, where he's got on the vest, hat, and long hair in a ponytail. It's the perfect mix of 90s cool guy that somehow still looks cool today. If you haven't seen him in the SNK games, you've probably seen him as a guest character in another game of your liking. Fighting Lair, Street Fighter, Smash Bros, he's doing the wandering fighter bit pretty well. But the consistent thing in all these appearances is he has on that classic outfit as his default. And the thing about Terry is, despite being SNK's most well-known character, once the last Fatal Fury titled game came out, Terry sort of went off to the side. He was still in all the games because he's Terry, but his storylines were not the main focus anymore, so they could have just kept him in the same outfit forever since he's not plot relevant or on the box art and no one would probably complain. But enter Garo Mark of the Wolves, released in 1999, which was a sequel to the main Fatal Fury storyline, but set 10 years in the future. This roster was all new characters that were either completely unique or related to classic Fatal Fury characters, with one exception: Terry returned. Now he was a mentor to his adopted son Rock, who's the protagonist, and since this is older and wiser Terry, they gave him a new look. No hat, hair down, and most importantly, the jacket. This jacket was so cool that everyone instantly was like, oh yeah, this redesign makes total sense. And from then on, Terry would occasionally have this outfit as his default or an alternate costume. They didn't need to change him, but when they did, they cooked hard. I like that the main connection it has to the original outfit is the star is still on the back for whenever he wants to pose away from the camera. However, Terry has still been subject to other redesigns on his original outfit, albeit very minor, and mostly on his hat. In the original Fatal Fury games, the hat was blank. I guess he just wanted the sun protection and didn't want to rep any teams. Like, where's he from? Southtown? Where's that? Florida? Can we slap a Marlins logo on there? But on the official character art, the hat logo was Neo Geo, the system you could play Fatal Fury on. Once the King of Fighters hit though, the logo was not only changed to the Fatal Fury logo on the art, but he now officially has the Fatal Fury hat in-game. I'm glad they did this since I was always mildly annoyed when the hat was blank. Plus, with Fatal Fury no longer around at the time, it reminds us of its existence forever. Then they took away the logo in the King of Fighters 13, but thankfully brought it back in 15. In 14 though, he actually had a different hat, but also they gave him a different outfit altogether. No one ever really talks about how they tried redesigning Terry again. Like, this outfit is fine, but I don't know if this design will ever come back since the King of Fighters 14 is not as popular as the games that came out in between. I like that they tried this, but it falls behind the original and the jacket outfit for me, so I'd really just want it back for the sake of variety. But that being said, I think it's supposed to represent his Fatal Fury 1 look, where he had rolled up sleeves, which is a cool callback, though it's so forgotten of a look for him that I forgot to point out it predated the ripped sleeves look. But when it comes to any of Terry's outfits, as long as he has that aura of naturally being cool without a care in the world, any redesign suits him. It can be red, it can be brown, it can be shirtless. So that's enough for me to make him number 1 on this list.
Okay!
Now, what did you think? Did all these redesigns keep in the spirit of the original, or did we see characters just be made worse? And what are some of your favorite fighting game character redesigns, whether I discussed them or not? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.